It was summer in the forest, the kind of summer that made the leaves shine as if tiny elves had polished them. The streams hummed softly as they danced over the stones. The birds practiced new songs, and the bees were too busy with their dances to notice anything else. Right in the middle of it all lived Baloo, a round-bellied brown bear with a curious snout and sleepy eyes that blinked slowly, like someone always ready for a nap or a snack. Baloo loved summer. It was the season of juicy berries, of fish that jumped in the river like popcorn, and of long, golden days when he could lie in the sun and daydream about absolutely nothing. His favorite spot was a soft clearing, deep in the forest, where he'd stretch out on his back, watching the clouds shapeshift in the sky. Sometimes he saw a castle, sometimes a honey sandwich, most times a pillow. Ah, summer, ... double quotes, he sighed, holding a fig in his paw. Life could always be like this ... In the afternoons, he'd chat with Neela the fox, who was always coming up with new jokes. At night, he'd shoot the breeze with Zico the crow, who told strange stories that Baloo was sure were true. One day, "I saw a star fall and turn into a mushroom," Zico would say, with that mysterious look that made it clear he didn't care. Whether anyone believed him or not, Baloo would laugh heartily. "You daydream more than I do, Zico." The days drifted lazily by, and Baloo forgot that time like the leaves on the trees changes color. Summer felt endless, and he didn't worry about tomorrow. But tomorrow would come, with yellow leaves, chilly winds, and an invitation bears can't refuse. Hibernation. Only Baloo wasn't ready. Not yet. It was still summer, and he was too happy to think about sleeping. Summer said its goodbye as if it didn't want to leave. First came the cooler breezes in the late afternoon. Then the sky took on a more serious tone, like it was keeping secrets. And the leaves began dressing themselves in yellow, orange, and red. The forest was getting ready for silence. The animals knew. They always do. The ants hurried along, the birds started to migrate. Squirrels scurried with cheeks full of nuts, and the bears prepared for the great sleep. Baloo knew too. It was what bears always did. Eat a lot, find a good place, and sleep. Sleep for days and days, until the snow melted and spring stretched its flowers again. But before the sleep came the work. Every year was the same. Eat a lot, really a lot. It was time for the full belly project. Fruits, roots, insects, fish, honey, especially honey. Bears spent the whole autumn stuffing themselves and searching for shelter. Baloo began following the routine. "Time to get fat to sleep," he said, pushing his fourth apple of the day with a serious face. But unlike other years, something inside him felt distracted. While his friends prepared, he wandered slowly through the forest, stopping more often to watch the falling leaves, listening to the wind whisper through dry branches. It was like something inside him was out of sync with the season still. He stuck to the plan. He ate everything he could, said goodbye to Neela the fox, who promised to visit his dreams. He gave one last wave to Zico the crow, already flying away, and then he went to find his shelter. A hole between stones, hidden and cozy, just like tradition said. He lined it with dry leaves, turned around a few times, settled in, took a deep breath. "All right, now just sleep," he said aloud, trying to convince himself. But the sleep didn't come. He closed his eyes, turned to his side, sighed nothing. Outside, the cold grew stronger. Snow was already announced by the whistling wind through the cracks. One by one, the bears of the forest slipped into the silence of hibernation, all of them, except Baloo. His body was tired, but his mind was not. And deep inside the den, with wide-open eyes, he murmured, "What if this year I simply don't know how to sleep?" The first sleepless night still felt like a fluke. Baloo thought, "I must be too excited about all the honey I ate yesterday." When the second day came, and the third, and the fourth, he began to realize this was not normal. While the other bears snored deeply in their caves like great noisy mountains, Baloo was awake and frustrated. "I'm a bear. Hibernate. That's what I do, he said, pacing back and forth in his den, ears perked up and his head full of thoughts. That's when the SLEEP plan began. Special little efforts to ease the problem. Baloo was determined. First try, counting sheep. But he couldn't. Count past 23, 24, 25. Now I'm even more awake, he shouted, paws on his head. Second try, calming tea. He made a tea from leaves, recommended by the wise and sleepy owl. Drink it before bed and think of something. Peaceful, the owl said. Baloo drank, lay down, and pictured jelly dripping off a jar. Too peaceful. I'm hungry. Third try, listening to forest sounds. He lay very still, hearing the wind, the leaves, a distant wolf's howl. But soon he started narrating everything like a radio show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Cricket number 7 takes the stage with his nighttime solo in G minor. More awake than ever, fourth try. Bear stretches, inspired by the Otter's Lake magazine. Baloo tried some stretches, but halfway through the second stretch, he got a knot in his back. Ouch. Now I'm not only awake, I'm crooked. Try talking to the moon. He left the den and looked up at the huge clear sky full of stars. Hi, moon. Do you know something I don't? The moon, silent, just shone back. Baloo stayed there, and for the first time in days, felt something different. Calm. But it didn't last long. Sixth try. Reading a book. There was an old cookbook in the den. Baloo started reading, thinking it would bore him to sleep, but he got excited on the page. About honey cookies, and spent the night dreaming up ways to improve the recipe. Can I add walnut pieces? Or bits of apple? Or both? No sleep. Just more ideas the next morning. Eyes droopy, deep dark circles, and a heavy head. Baloo sat at the cave's entrance and murmured, almost laughing, I think I'm the first Insomniac Bear in forest history. Snow began to fall softly. Branches bent under the weight of the cold, and Baloo, alone and awake, understood maybe he needed more than dry leaves and a full belly to sleep. Maybe, just maybe, he was missing a beautiful dream to dream. It was the middle of the night in the forest. Branches were covered in snow. The streams had stopped flowing, and the sounds of life had settled into the cold silence of hibernation. Everyone was asleep. Everyone except Baloo, with tired eyes. In a restless heart, he walked slowly between the trees, feeling the crunch of snow beneath his heavy paws. The sky was sprinkled with stars, and the chilly air tickled his nose. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew light and steady, shaking the dry leaves hanging on the stubborn trees. Baloo stopped, felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from a presence. Hey, wind, he whispered softly, not really sure why. Why can't I sleep? The wind blew again, this time softer, almost like a whisper. Maybe because you're not done waking up inside yet, it seemed to say. Baloo blinked, waking up inside. But I'm a bear. I'm supposed to be sleeping on the outside, for goodness sake. The wind replied only with silence. But Baloo stayed there, looking up at the sky, as if waiting for an answer to fall with the snowflakes. He remembered the stories he heard as a cub, told by his mother while she cradled him with her warm paw. Winter. Sleep is the time for dreams, she said. We dream about what we've lived. That's why we live before we sleep. What if that was it, Baloo thought? What if the problem wasn't the sleep, but the lack of a dream to call his own? Maybe. The other bears slept peacefully because they were content. They had done what they needed to do. But Baloo felt like something was waiting for him out there, something he hadn't lived yet. He sat on a rock and looked around. Everything white, everything quiet, everything asleep. I'm not a wrong bear, just an unfinished bear, he said to no one and to everyone at the same time. That's when he heard the soft rustling of someone moving through the bushes. Who's there? He asked, standing up with a start. Out of the leaves came a small fox with thick fur and sharp eyes. You can't sleep either? She asked, raising her eyebrows with curiosity. Baloo shook his head. No, and you? I'm a fox deer. Don't hibernate, she winked. Baloo smiled. That was the first conversation he'd had in days. I'm Baloo. Nice to meet you. I'm Luma. And, can I say something? Of course. I think you're not sick. You're just waking up, she said, looking straight into his eyes. And maybe that's the best kind of sleep. The one that comes after discovery. The bear stayed quiet. That sentence echoed inside him like a gentle thunder. That night they didn't sleep. They walked together. They talked. Luma showed Baloo shortcuts through the forest he'd never seen before. And for the first time, he didn't miss sleep. He felt the presence of himself, and when dawn began to paint the sky orange, Baloo felt that maybe he was beginning to understand why he couldn't sleep. Maybe his dream wasn't inside the cave, but out there. While the other bears slept in their dark, silent caves, Baloo wandered. The snow, once strange and cold, was now a white carpet where he left steady, curious footprints. The chilly wind seemed to talk to him every day, blowing questions and ideas he never would have thought of in the summer. In the company of the fox Luma, Baloo began to see the forest with different eyes. They watched owls in silence, listened to the cracking of frozen trees, and admired the beauty of ice-covered lakes that reflected the sky like magical mirrors. Have you noticed how everything gets quieter in winter? Luma said one night. Lying on a snow-covered log, it's like the forest breathes more slowly too. Baloo nodded. But even in the silence, he heard more than ever before. The sound of his own heart. The sound of life that doesn't hibernate. He started to jot down things in his mind. Ideas, thoughts, even some that sounded like poetry. Maybe hibernation isn't a pause. Maybe it's a choice. And maybe I chose to stay awake to discover something that only exists when everything else sleeps. That's how he felt. He wasn't sick. He wasn't broken. He was awake in a different way. He began helping small animals who didn't sleep either. Squirrels searching for forgotten nuts, owls who had lost their nests, hares startled by the forest's silence. Each gesture was small, but it filled Baloo with warmth inside. And that warmth, surprisingly, was enough to get through the cold. One day, Luma said, "You don't seem like a bear in winter. You seem like a bear at the start of spring." Maybe she was right. A bear blossoming against the flow of time. By the end of that cold month, Baloo no longer asked why he couldn't sleep. Now he asked, what else can I discover while I'm awake? And so a new kind of winter was born in the forest, Baloo's winter. The bear who didn't sleep, but awakened. The snow began to slowly melt, dripping timid streams over the stones. The cold air gave way to gentle breezes, and the sky, once gray and silent, now dawned with pink hues and the songs of little birds returning from afar. One by one, the dens opened, the bears yawned, stretched their paws, and rubbed their eyes as if waking from a long, sweet dream. The forest once again filled with heavy footsteps, snuffles, and friendly snores. And there was Baloo, sitting on a rock with a twig in his paw, drawing on the ground. Baloo, called Brown, his cave neighbor, his voice still thick with sleep. "You already awake?" Baloo smiled. "I didn't sleep." The bear stopped. Some frowned, others scratched their ears. They didn't understand. How could someone not hibernate? Baloo didn't explain everything at once. He simply invited them to walk with him. He showed them the trails he'd learned from Luma, the fox, the frozen lakes he'd seen, the winter stars, the brave birds, the little stories he'd lived while the others dreamed. At first, many didn't understand. Some even found it strange. But when Baloo spoke about how he helped a hare who had lost her burrow, how his heart raced when he heard an owl sing, and how he discovered there is beauty even in the quietest days, the bear's eyes began to shine. Maybe Baloo had done something no one ever tried. To live the winter awake and find warmth within himself. That year, Baloo didn't sleep. Everyone else awoke with him. Later, In a clearing where the grass was beginning to grow back, Baloo laid a blanket on the ground, sliced dried fruits, honey, and nuts he had carefully saved. He invited Luma, the owls, squirrels, and his bear friends too. They had a spring welcome picnic, and among laughter, hugs, and stories shared around a big old tree trunk, a bear cub asked, "Baloo, will you sleep next winter?" Baloo thought, looked up at the clear sky and answered, "Maybe yes, maybe no. I think every winter brings a different calling. But if I stay awake, I already know what to do." And then he winked, as if he knew that being awake could also be a dream. Just with eyes wide open, the end.